from Arizona.
Thank you. I rise in support of my amendment, number 33, prohibiting changes to the existing air tour management plans, or ATMPs. This amendment would prohibit air tour management plans for national parks from completely banning air tour operations over the parks. Additionally, this amendment requires an air tour management plan to take into consideration the economic viability of commercial air traffic operators. While the ATMPs do real economic harm to operators, it is also discriminatory against visitors who choose to experience the national parks by aerial sightseeing. As we move past the pandemic years, many national parks saw their resources strained by the large number of visitors as the public began to travel again. Air tours are an important option for many visitors conducting a once-in-a-lifetime to see such famous landmarks. Visitors taking advantage of air tours benefit by avoiding traffic, wait times, and walking trails that are inaccessible for the disabled or elderly while reducing the congestion and demand on park infrastructure. The national park should be available for all visitors to see. Limiting flights over the park unfairly limits the elderly, very young, disabled, and others to experience the park. Limiting flights over the parks is discriminating to those who might not either have the resources, time, or physical ability to see them in another way. Like ground-based tours, air tours are a valid part of our visitor experience, providing a unique window for which we can share our cultural, historical, and environmental sites with the world. Air tours require no ground-based infrastructure at the park, which allows visitors accessibility without the need for roads, trails, signs, bathrooms, garage cans, or anything else for services. By further restricting an already limited number of allowable air tours, we are reducing opportunities to access our parks in ways that leave little to no environmental footprint or disturbance. Through carbon offset efforts and strict altitude requirements to noise, just to name a few, air tour operators are working to ensure they have responsible stewardship of the nation's parks. Typically, operators pay a fee each time an air tour flies within the park boundary. The national park collects hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue each year from these air tour flights. Air tours require no infrastructure, leaving the bulk of overflight fees to go towards supporting services that benefit the public. If oversight access is removed completely, it removes the ability to use new technologies like the electric quiet air. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, number 33, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Arizona reserves. For what purpose does the gentleman from Washington seek recognition?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to claim the time in opposition to this amendment.
Gentleman is recognized.
Speaker, this amendment requires the FAA to consider the economic viability of a commercial air tour over national parks. In 2022, the Park Service recorded 312 million recreational visits to our national parks. This number reflects the overwhelming significance our parks have to the American public. They serve as a place of recreation, a place used to teach new generations about conservation and wildlife, and a place to admire the beauty of the great outdoors in the U.S. National Park air tour management plans are in place to help protect the sanctity of parks from incessant helicopter overflights, which can disrupt both wildlife and the natural beauty of the parks that visitors enjoy. So I urge everyone to protect our parks from the noise and disturbance of increased helicopter tours by voting no on this amendment. This amendment would require air tour management plans to consider profits in the development of those plans, which would undoubtedly increase the number of helicopters flying above our parks. This runs contrary to the original purpose of these management plans, which is to protect the integrity of the parks. Helicopter tours are an incredible way to see national parks for the privileged few, but they simultaneously degrade the park experience for the vast majority of other park visitors. Our national parks were created as a public good to preserve our natural wonders for all Americans to enjoy. We must not erode that in favor of tour profits and those who can afford to pay. With that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield such time as he may consume to my gentleman friend from Texas, Mr. Nels.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Every person should have an opportunity to view and experience our amazing national parks, whether it's Mount Rushmore, whether it's select areas in Hawaii, or whether it's the Grand Canyon. I can't remember the last time somebody in this room or anybody has ever tried to walk it. You've ever tried to walk it, but I bet you there are people up in this gallery that have been to Las Vegas before and they see these beautiful helicopters that give you an opportunity to view the beautiful Grand Canyon, that big hole in the ground. You can do it, and you can do it safely and effectively through a helicopter. The ranking member just mentioned about it supports the privileged few. I would argue that the disabled and elderly, how else are you going to get there? That's not the privileged few. It's right for grandma and grandpa that may want to go and view the Grand Canyon or Mount Rushmore. It makes no sense what we're trying to do here. Air tours are often the only way the disabled and elderly are allowed to see our national parks. It's regulated by the FAA, and these operators, they have a great safety record. Unfortunately, the Biden administration is attempting to limit the number of air tours at a number of our national parks, all at the request, go figure, no surprise, all at the request of certain environmental stakeholders. This is irresponsible, it's un-American. Also, the air tour operators, oftentimes in the off-season, don't forget what they do in the off-season, they partner with federal, state, and local governments to help fight wildfires. They're great Americans. We need to continue to support them. I ask my colleagues to support Rep. Gosar's amendment. With that, I yield back.
I reserve.
Gentleman from Arizona reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you. Before I yield 3 minutes to my good friend, Representative Case from Hawaii, I do want to note he's a great American, and I do think that the debates here on the floor of the House are a reflection of being great Americans as opposed to being un-American. And with that, I yield 3 minutes to my good friend, Ed Case.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you so much. You know, our national parks are among our most universally supported and treasured institutions, and they cannot survive in an atmosphere of incredible popularity where we simply must find accommodations to protect the basic principles and qualities of those parks for which we treasure them so much. And one of the areas where we have significant problems is in overuse of our parks by commercial air tour operations, which severely degrade some of our parks and have the risk of degrading all of our parks for a number of different reasons, whether they be environmental, whether they be protection of our natural resources, and whether they be visitor enjoyment, because fundamentally, commercial air tours overflying a national park with noise and other disruption on the ground does degrade the park experience for the many who enjoy them in that way. There is no right to overfly our parks. Now, I concede and agree that there is some reasonable area and use for commercial air tours. I certainly want those that cannot experience our parks to experience them in this way. And I certainly believe that they have a place in our parks, but not where they are today and not where they're going. We recognized this challenge 23 years ago in this Congress by passing a law which essentially required air tour management plans which accommodated all interests, and those plans are now coming to fruition, and this amendment is on the floor because the sponsor and others do not like the results, which accommodate air tour operations in the vast majority of our parks. This process has been a good one, a difficult one in which the operators have participated. And they will continue to have a place under these plans, a reasoned place. But the fact that some of them don't like the outcome does not mean that the process is not a valid process. This process should be continued to its conclusion. It should be accommodated, and it should be implemented in a way that is reasonable to all. This amendment destroys that process and would degrade our parks to the detriment of the vast majority of the people who enjoy our parks. Thank you very much. I urge opposition to the amendment and yield back.
Reserve.
Gentleman from Washington reserves. The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
Yeah, once again, you know, having had these tour operators in Arizona, they've moved technology to quiet air, and you can barely hear these planes. You can be right next to them with these quiet air turbines, and you don't even hear them. So to say that they're disrupting to the environment, this does not happen. And so from that standpoint, I wish everybody would vote for this amendment. It's a smart idea, and I think this is the way to go. And so I wish everybody would vote for my amendment, and with that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's been a good debate on this particular bill. Clearly, there's a difference of opinion, and clearly there are experiences where helicopters and helicopter tours do disrupt both the wildlife and other visitors and the people around the national park. So would ask all the Americans in this body to vote no on this amendment. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Arizona. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.
Mr. Chair.